So today we are joined by Valerie Bowden, and I am so excited to have you on the show, Valerie. This is going to be a really fun conversation and maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. So thank you first for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to it all week to have this conversation with you.
I love it. So first, let's just start off and have you share a little bit with our listeners about who you are and what you do.
Yes. Okay. So I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So very Midwest girl. And my dream was always to go visit the African continent. For some reason, that was like the place I always felt drawn to. And unfortunately, at that time, I still really viewed it in terms of like charity and nonprofit. So I went to Ethiopia after college to volunteer. And it was it was a great experience because I loved Ethiopia, but I quickly realized like nobody needed me. And then the nonprofit wasn't really doing what they said they were doing. And I didn't like that aspect of it, but I loved Ethiopia. And so I came back to the US, I got my master's in social work, and I couldn't get Ethiopia out of my head. So I was like, I have to go back, I have to revisit it. And I wanted to see other African countries to see like, would they surprise me as much as Ethiopia did? And because I was out of grad school, I had no money. I decided to backpack the continent with a backpack and a tent by myself. My mom is still mad at me for it. But I started in Cape Town and I spent 7 months backpacking across the whole continent, loving every moment, seeing how different each country is. And then after my trip, I ended up in Ethiopia, decided to live there for 8 years. And then I started my company Cradle, and I'm now back in the US working with African talent, but based in Pittsburgh at the moment. So that's kind of a big overview of my experience.
I have so many questions that I want to ask you, and I do want to try to keep the discussion focused for our audience. But I just personally have to know, like, what was it like, first of all, backpacking across a continent? Like, hello, I
Mhm.
can hardly walk 3 miles down the road. So, what was that like on your body, and how long did that take you?
Yep. So in total, I went through 13 countries and I did it by like public transportation. So I was like on a bus, like a bus that's for 12 people, but had like 25 people and a chicken on it. Or I was hitchhiking, and it was like every day waking up and doing something super exciting because for our whole lives, we've only heard the bad side of African countries. And so I got to experience all the good things. So one day I was gorilla trekking, and the next day I'm whitewater rafting on the Nile. The next day I'm in a marketplace. And everywhere I went, the one stereotype that was true is that the hospitality is just so amazing and people are so nice to me. And all my stories are like, I got lost and then someone helped me. Like that's like every one of my stories starts with that. So yeah, no, it was really exciting and definitely like an amazing time.
So cool. And so you mentioned that you started your company Cradle. I'm
Mhm.
curious, what inspired you to begin that company and focus on connecting people with African talent?
Great question. So, coming from social work and then spending so much time on the continent, I started to realize what people really need on the continent is jobs, right? We don't need to do donations or anything like that when people have good sustainable income. So, when I was living in Ethiopia, right before COVID hit, I started working for a US outsourcing company and they had large clients like McDonald's, MasterCard, like huge Fortune 500 companies. And it was really exciting because overnight we would hire like 20 Ethiopians or 50 Ethiopians to work for these US companies. And it showed me like the win win of job creation. It was creating good jobs, but the US companies were really happy. And then when I moved back to the US, I decided I wanted to start my own company that focused on remote team members based anywhere in Africa. I wanted to pay them better. I wanted to do a better career path for the people we were hiring. And I also really wanted to promote hiring from Africa because nobody knows that like your best virtual assistant is probably in Zimbabwe or Kenya. Like nobody knows about that side of the continent. So it's been really cool to kind of be the bridge and connect these really cool African professionals to US businesses and entrepreneurs.
Amazing. And how did you yourself get connected, or how are you staying connected with these African professionals? Where are you finding them? And I'm sure they absolutely love working with you, but talk to me about what that's been like.
Yeah, it's been exciting. So originally, because I spent 8 years in Ethiopia and my husband's Ethiopian, my network is pretty deep. So a lot of the people we've hired, I know personally, or they're friends of friends of people that we've hired. Now we've grown so fast over the past year that I do have like an internal recruitment team that really helps vet people, make sure that they're really good team members. But probably half the people we hire are current team members, friends, families, like their wife, their sister. And so it really shows that we're creating like a really cool work environment and it has like a family feeling. And so that part I'm really proud of.
That's awesome. And for anyone listening, you might be thinking, "Okay, wait a minute. I thought this podcast was about short-term rentals. So why are we talking about Ethiopian talent?" But one of the things when Valerie and I were first introduced by a mutual colleague, she and I hit it off and I was like, "I just absolutely love how you had a vision for what you wanted to do
Mhm.
and you created it." And for anyone who's in the short-term rental space, that is 100% applicable. That, I want you to listen to Valerie and really hear what she has done and think about how her story could apply to you, meaning you have a vision for what you want in your business and you do whatever it takes to make that happen. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think what you're doing and what you've done already is just incredible.
Thank you so much. And one, I think, takeaway from my story is that when I first decided to backpack Africa or move to Ethiopia, I had very little support. Like my friends and family were not for it, but I felt in my gut that it was the right move to do. So I think for anybody who's thinking about these rentals and friends and family are saying, like, it's not the time, it's not the right economy, it's not the right president, whatever the excuse is, if you feel it in your gut, like you have to listen to that voice and it does turn out
Mhm.
to work out in the end.
Mhm. Amen, sister. I actually writing a book right now, and I talk about that in my book about your intuition and your gut. And I call it my God rod. I absolutely envision my gut as something that goes through my core like a piece of rebar goes into cement. And I really use that not only as an antenna to look for opportunities, but I also, turn internally and really try to dig deep when I do feel like something is calling me, or I do feel like there's an opportunity ahead, or maybe something that isn't apparent on the surface. Really, really trusting your gut and intuition is something that's so important. And just recently, actually, I experienced something where I hadn't listened to my gut, and I am paying the price for that now. Right. So,
100%. No, the best decisions I've made have been following my gut. And what I've learned too is like you don't see the whole path, right? When I was backpacking Africa, there's not a lot of maps or not a lot of information online. So I didn't know where I was going to get the day before, but you always get it in the nick of time. And even leading my own business and how much we've grown, I don't have the whole map out, but every day I'm just making that progress. And then the path lights up along the way.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So you came back to the US, you started Cradle, and I know that you have been growing ever since you began. At what point did you yourself decide, you know what? I need a virtual assistant. How and when did that decision occur and what did that look like for you?
That's a great question. So I officially launched Cradle 1 month before I gave birth. So looking back, not the best timing. It was a slow start. And I would say the first year and a half of Cradle, it was very fragile. It was very like, are we going to make it? My only prayer was like, please do not make me go back to a 9 to 5. Like I just was really worried about it. And then we were slowly growing. And it got to the point where because I have 2 kids, I'm very focused on also being a mom. I've seen other business leaders, promote that like 80-hour work week. And I just knew I did not want that. And so January of this year, after a year and a half of doing business, I realized I could not get everything done without going into the time that was for my family. And so I decided to hire someone. And I decided not to hire necessarily like a VA because I knew that I was good at what I could do, but I needed someone just to take over the whole operations of what I was doing. So I hired my first team member, Helena, who's currently in Ethiopia, to take over operations. And I'm not kidding, within 3 months, we tripled. The growth was so crazy fast. And it's really linked to the fact that once I got the operations off my plate, which was not my favorite thing, I like the sales and marketing part. Once somebody else was doing that for me, it freed me up with more time so I could do more sales. And also because Helena likes operations, she did it much better than I did. It's like very embarrassing how much better she is at that than I was. Um, and then we continue to grow so fast that since Helena joined in January, we now have 3 other team members who have joined. And I just hired a VA finally, just for me personally, to help me do my own task better.
Go girl. I love that. I love that. And I love that you recognized that there is inefficiency when you are operating outside of your genius zone. And it's
Mhm.
always, I think, this delicate balance because so often we hear, well, you have to operate outside of your comfort zone and that's how you grow. And yes, that is 100% accurate. But I think there is a misconception between comfort zone and
Mhm.
genius zone. And I'm curious, again, did you take time to think about that after your work day or after your work week where you were like, this is really feeling heavy? Or was that decision only based in you cutting into your family time? Or was it both?
I think it's both. I think as an entrepreneur, you're very much like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. But the truth is, like, nobody can do everything perfectly. And there were some tasks that I just really dreaded. And I just kept thinking, oh my goodness, if I could stop doing that and just feeling that, like I would, set up a little taller and I could just feel that burden off of me. So when Helena started doing that, it freed me up so much. So it wasn't just it part of it was the family time and part of it was because I love that like feeling alive feeling. And I
Mhm.
feel that when I'm doing like when I'm having conversations like this or talking to a client or doing my own podcast, that feels so good. But when I'm doing the payroll and the operations and the tedious things, anything to do with math, it's like that is not what I should be doing. It makes me so frustrated. So yeah, I would pay attention to that feeling that makes you feel good, that zone of genius is where you should be operating.
Amen. That's something that I personally really factor in is how I feel when I'm doing something. And I know, again, it might seem fluffy or woo woo or whatever the case might be, but I really, really do try to have an awareness about that so I can make a smarter choice about when those activities come down the pike in the future. Hey, this is
Mhm.
something that I want to continue doing, or you know what? I am going to outsource this to someone else, to either a member of my current team or I need a new team member. So I really do try to have an awareness about that in the moment. Uh,
Yeah, I think you can feel it. And then I think it also is just common sense. Like one of our clients who's a Pittsburgh client, he's a big CEO, and I had a meeting with him, and he was like, so when I'm in meetings like this, I'm not doing sales for my company. And I
mhm,
was like, oh yeah, that hits hard. Like when you're doing those tasks, those like I'm copying and pasting, I'm uploading things, like things that anybody else could do it. That time could be used for sales, marketing, things that are like revenue operating. Anything that brings in money should be what you're focusing on and let somebody else do everything else.
yeah. Let's talk a bit about that because again, if you're listening to us and you're thinking, okay, Stacey, I know you have a VA team that manages, your client communications with your guests, your bookings, things like that. I'm not to that point. And that's a-okay. Like everyone has their own approaches and what's right for them. But I would love to just open our listeners' eyes into some things beyond day-to-day management for guest bookings, shall we say, or, guest relations. What additional things can virtual assistants be helping with, like managing inboxes and social media and finances? Talk with us a little bit about, in your experience, what some of those more popular tasks might be for folks who are real estate investors?
Definitely. I mean, it's unlimited. Anything that's like teachable, trainable, that you can delegate is a great task. Some of the most popular tasks RVAs do are social media, like just scheduling, uploading. I'm really big on LinkedIn. So my VA is reaching out to people on LinkedIn to connect with, handling that inbox. It could be getting you on podcasts to be talking about your properties. That's a big one we do is podcast guesting, inbox, especially customer service. Like if you want to be able to reply to people quickly, having your VA do that is really great. They can answer phone calls for you. They can help with accounting, QuickBooks. Yeah, I mean anything that you feel like you can teach someone to do, especially if it's repeatable, that's
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that's a big to start with. And usually you start off slow. And then once you start to trust them, once you start to spend time with them, then you can ramp them up in terms of their capabilities and what they can do for you.
Yeah. Another thing that I know a lot of folks do in the real estate investing world, and again, this may not be for all of our listeners, but if you are in a position where you are looking to expand your portfolio, either from properties that you want to purchase, or perhaps you are co hosting or have a property management business, a lot of folks utilize virtual assistants for cold calling. I know that cold calling is not a task that a lot of people love to do. And so it's a wonderful thing to be able to outsource that to a virtual assistant. Do you find that a lot of real estate investors utilize your team members for that as well?
Yes, there's a lot of companies that are actually hiring. So Ethiopians in particular have extra great like American accents, kind of naturally. And so I know tons of Ethiopian cold callers who are just calling homeowners saying like, "Hey, do you want to sell?" And that's all they're doing all day. I have one realtor that we work with who has just like a large CRM, and so he has an appointment setter being like, "Hey, so and so, just wanted to touch base with you. If you want to schedule an appointment with him, if you're thinking about selling, if you have any questions to your home, if you have friends who want to sell." So they're doing that kind of like a personal outreach. But yeah, cold calling, appointment setting. Let's say you have like a lead magnet and you put it out there, and all of a sudden you're getting too many leads that you can't really follow up with. You have like a cemetery of leads. Having someone follow up quickly and be like, "Hey, we saw that you downloaded this. You must be interested in blah blah blah. Do you want to have an appointment?" Things like that are really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And again, we see this all the time in the business world. So why do we not think about applying these same practices into our real estate investing, into our hospitality worlds? Ladies, again, if you are listening, I really want you to think about what Valerie is saying, because I would dare to say that we as CEOs of our own real estate investing and hospitality businesses can be very strategic with our time. And time is one of our most precious commodities. And there is a value to our time.
Mhm.
And when we are able to outsource skills that can be executed by someone else and free up our minds to, have the highest and best use of our minds, like we look for highest and best use of a piece of real estate. Well, guess what? Our brains are a piece of real estate, right? But there's tremendous growth that can happen. It really is paying yourself. It's investing in the growth of your future. Would you agree?
100%. I think a lot of people think it's just faster for me to do it myself than to teach somebody else to do it, or they don't even have time to train a VA. But I think it's one of those things like if you hire a VA and then you think over the next 90 days, I'm going to really invest in this person, teaching them what I'm doing, having them do this, giving them feedback, then in 90 days you will have so much more free time.
Mhm.
I know when I first hired Helena, all of a sudden I had free time. And then I actually had to start being intentional with it. Because if not, I'd be like, oh, now I had time to scroll on Instagram. But no, now I had to like start putting out blocks of time. Like, what are you going to do with that free time and
Mhm.
scheduling that out? And it feels really good once you spent a couple months getting everything set up.
Yeah. I think another misconception, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this. A lot of people think, oh gosh, well, I can't hire a virtual assistant because I don't have everything in place yet. Like, I don't have all my training materials in one spot. Or, I have different places where I store things and I need to get that together before I hire a VA. In my experience, that's one of the best ways to actually onboard a VA is to give them a project, right?
Mhm.
Let them know you've got different resources in different places and you want them to bring it together, and then they can really learn those materials too. What are your recommendations for someone in that position who may think, "Gosh, I don't have everything ready yet?"
Right. You'll never get it ready. That's for sure. Unfortunately, I mean, everybody I've hired has walked into like a mess. And I think they're really, because we have a really good social media presence, I think when they joined, they think we're like a lot more together than we are. But because we're growing so fast, things are a little bit disorganized in the back end that we're trying to fix. So yeah, get them started as much as possible. Have them just shadow you, like put a Zoom call up, let them follow you throughout your day. Then as you have time, you can throw things their way. Have them create like an SOP, like a standard operating procedure, I think is really helpful. So you can say, like, I have these training materials everywhere. And then I want them all in this folder. I want them to look like this, and then have them write that out. And so what that does is, one, it creates like clarity on what they should be doing. So if there's a miscommunication, you can kind of see it in writing. Two, as they grow, that might be the training document that other VAs follow. Or three, worst case scenario, if something happens to that VA, you don't have to spend time retraining another replacement, but you have it already documented on what they're supposed to be doing. So
Mhm.
yeah, don't be afraid of the mess. It's better just to get started, because by the time you get them, if you wait until you're perfect, it's going to take forever. So if you just get them started, they'll perfect it for you, and probably better than what you would have done yourself.
I always say when you think about hiring or outsourcing or even buying a property, it's often as parents, we think, or as adults, we think, gosh, I'm going to wait till I can afford to have kids to
Mm,
actually have them. And same thing that you just said, if you wait till you can afford kids, you will never have them because they always cost more than what you expected. No, but I think that's a really good call out that, things don't have to be perfect. And I love the advice that you've given to help kind of people get those resources in place to train their support team members.
right. And if people are worried about the cost, I would just say, like, if you had 3 extra hours that you don't have to do that work anymore, could you bring in like 3 new clients or 3 new properties? Or what could you do with that money? And 100% you can make more, like the ROI will be there very
Mhm.
easily.
Mhm. I'm curious too, since you manage a business remotely, I
Mhm.
manage a business remotely, and there are a lot of our listeners who are managing properties remotely. When we have businesses that are remote, it sometimes can add complexity, no doubt. I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced managing a business remotely, and how have you navigated them?
That's a great question. I think one challenge I found is having part time people is harder for me to manage remotely, because I don't really know when they're working. So when you have a VA, maybe you can only start with 10 hours a week, but it's actually going to be harder to only have them 10 hours per week, because when you need them, they're probably not there. But if you can get someone, we just started only onboarding people who can work 40 hours a week, and they have to work my time zone. That's kind of like the default. They have to work 9 to 5 EST. Then they're always available. I can pull them into meetings. They're really there for me when I need it. So that was one challenge I realized. They have to match my time zone. They have to be full time. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And then other than that, we've just set up Monday. We have a meeting, like, what are we going to do this week? Thursday, we follow up to make sure everything's done, so that if it's not done, we get it done before Friday, and we try to take Friday afternoons off internally. That's like our goal. And then besides that, we use WhatsApp. It's really great for remote team members. So you can
Mhm.
text, you can do calls, I do audio messages because I'm too lazy to actually text message. So we talk all the time, but having those like set meetings, I think really helps.
Totally, totally. I know with my team, we use WhatsApp to communicate back and forth, and to your point, I love the fact that I can just create a voice memo and it gets sent, and I can upload documents to WhatsApp. Obviously, we talk about WhatsApp being an app on our phone, but I use it on my desktop as well. and it's
Mhm.
fabulous. So I love that. Do you use any sort of project management system? I use monday.com in my business.
We use Monday as well. We use Monday, we use a few Google Sheets, and then other than that, lots of WhatsApp. But yeah, Monday's really helpful to see like who's working on things. You can see the status of a task. Yeah, I like Monday a lot.
Yeah. I also use Asana. I have a couple of different sides of my business. I also use Asana. I live and die by Asana, and a lot of that is where my personal tasks are. So I use Asana for what I need to do. And it's incredibly helpful. Both Monday and Asana have apps on your phone. So I can always access my things on the go. I also will often think of things while I'm driving or something of that nature. So I can pop into Asana and add a task,
Yeah.
while I'm on the go as well. So I love that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think in today's like post-COVID world, remote working is so easy. Like every tool you need. And I mean, at this point, we work with super large companies who are hiring teams in Africa. So, like, if they can make it work, like, they're not there for the social impact. They're there for like because it makes business sense. So, anyone that you're working with, whether they're small, starting off, like, if they have any doubts about remote team members, like, it's already being done by these big companies, and that's actually how those big companies are getting ahead because they have like a team on the ground who's doing so much of the work for them.
Yeah. And Valerie, if it's okay for me to ask, if someone is thinking about potentially leveraging a virtual assistant and perhaps hiring from Africa, around what hourly range should they budget for from a financial perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on if it's like a VA or if you want them to have sometimes like so if you want them to be doing video editing, sometimes that costs more. For us internally, we do around 9 or 10 an hour, or sometimes we'll do like a flat rate. So if you want someone 40 hours a week, maybe it's like 1,500 a month. But yeah, it's probably in line with like the Philippines for most African countries. The cost is
Okay.
similar.
Okay. Good to know. And I'm curious, are there any specific challenges or considerations that if someone is thinking, hey, a virtual assistant might make sense for me in my short term rental business, or for me to offload my inbox, or for me to
Mhm.
promote my direct booking website on social media? Are there any challenges besides communication or having the right systems in place to be able to communicate? Any other challenges that folks need to think about as they walk through that decision-making process?
I think you should really think about it as like a 90-day ramp up period. If you think this person's going to be super effective and perfect on day one, it's not going to work out well. So, especially when you talk about African countries, like the skill level is there, the desire, the work ethic is there, but you probably have all of this stuff in your head and maybe you're not used to managing people. So, it's a hard job for them to also learn what you want and what the expectations are with a new business that you know, like so well. So I would just really put that ramp up period as in 3 months, I will 100% offload these tasks to them. And then in the next 3 months, I'll be doing mentoring and feedback and coaching them until they get to the standard where I have 100% confidence in them.
Great. That's great advice. Okay. So now I want to move to the lightning round. Okay. And I'm going to ask you some questions, and I would love for you to answer with the very first thing that comes to
Okay.
mind.
I'm
Okay.
nervous. I'm nervous
First
for some.
question is, where is your favorite place to vacation?
Oof. Okay, Ethiopia. I mean, I'm definitely biased, but best coffee, best food. I love my husband's family, so if I got like a free airplane ticket, it'd be to Ethiopia.
Now, what's your favorite Ethiopian food?
Okay, so they have this, they're very vegan friendly. So I'm vegan. So they have this food called injera. It's kind of like a fermented crepe. It's very healthy. And then they put different kinds of like stew on top. So there's like a chickpea one, a lentil one, like carrots and beets and potatoes. So I just get the one that has like all of them, like 10 different options. I can't choose. I just want
All
it
of
all.
the above. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, what's one place you've never been that you want to visit?
Question. I would say Morocco is really high in my
Mm.
list. I haven't spent a lot of time in Northern Africa. So yeah, Morocco is probably next on my list to visit.
I actually have a friend, Valerie Malone, who is an interior designer for the short term rental space. She is such a dear, and she went to Morocco, I think last year, and she was like, "Stacey, it was so gorgeous." Like, not a lot of people know, like, it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
Yep, I wanna go. It's on my list. Now I wanna go even
There you go, even more. All right.
more.
What's one thing you know now that you wished you knew when you were starting your business?
I think it's to embrace bad decisions, like embrace the failures and just learn from them. In the beginning, every time I'd mess up, I was so sensitive. I would feel so bad. It would take me days to get over it. And now it's very much, it's not personal to me. It's like, okay, that decision led here. So we're going to change that by doing this. And it becomes really fun, just like perfect the business and make it like, my goal is to make it like a well-oiled machine. And so every time I make a bad decision, it's just a learning lesson. And so that's
Yes.
been really
You
good for
know,
me.
absolutely. And it's something that, I always encourage people to celebrate their wins, large or small, right? I think that's an important part of our journeys. But I also think it's equally important to celebrate our mistakes because our
Mhm.
mistakes are where our biggest learning opportunities are. And
Exactly.
it becomes a failure when we don't learn from those mistakes. It actually
Mhm.
becomes a win when we do learn from them.
I actually have a Google document. I call it like my MBA, and I just write out these lessons, and it really helps me understand. And then moving forward, I realize I'm so much quicker at making decisions because I already have that experience from doing it the wrong way. But it helps you. So yeah, just embrace it. The first couple of years, you're going to be a hot mess, and then it'll get better. It's-
Love that.
yeah.
That's great. Okay, next question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oof. I think the best piece of advice came before I went to Ethiopia the first time, and that was just to become like a student. So wherever you go, whether it's like a new country or starting a new business or getting into real estate for the first time, just be a student and don't think you know everything. Just be curious and learn. And that kind of attitude is what's going to actually get you ahead in the long run.
Love that. Love that. All right, and last question. What's one thing and or person that you're grateful for today?
Oh man, I not to be too cheesy, but I'm grateful for my team. Like I know I keep talking about Helena, but we just hired shout out to Nadia, Phil, and Joanna on my team. They just do such a great job and I'm so proud of them. And I feel very supported having these team members. And again, they're all remote, they're all based in Africa. So yeah, when you have a good team, you get ahead faster.
Amazing. Valerie, if someone is listening and they're like, okay, I need to get a hold of this girl. I need to find out what her company can possibly do for me. What is the best place for folks to find you online?
Perfect. So our website is cradle.com and that's spelled without the A. So it's crdle.com. But I'm also on LinkedIn every day posting tips about how to work with remote team members, whether they're in Africa or somewhere else in the world. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Valerie Bowden, and connect with me there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.